Hey friends, Frankie and Brad here in the kitchen. Today we're going to talk a little more about how guitar and music has evolved from generation to generation and decade to decade. Today we're going to start with covering this segment is going to be in two parts, but it's going to be the 1960s, and we're going to start off. Brad, start us off with the Four Seasons.
The Four Seasons, early 60s, they were probably a lot like the Beatles in the fact that they had great vocals. They were not guitar heavy, but they just had great songs with a lot of good vocals, kind of like the Beach Boys, who were the West Coast.
Right.
You know, they were probably the two biggest groups of the early 60s.
Yeah, we all grew up to that sound in grade school and junior high school.
You know, the Beach Boys with Fun, 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 and we were talking about another song that a lot of people thought were the Beach Boys.
Right.
What was that song?
Is it Little Old Lady from Pasadena?
Little Old Lady from
Yeah.
Pasadena. Now, Brian Wilson wrote that song, and they actually sang backup on that song, but it was Jan and Dean that recorded it.
Interesting.
So a lot of people thought that that was the Beach Boys.
And of course, right at the end of that era, come what we just kind of tapped into, the British invasion. And I'm going to let you start off with
All right,
the Beatles.
the Beatles, they kind of kicked it off, and to me, music took a different direction. People started seeing what was possible, and then you had all these other groups who were also being quite inventive in what they were doing. At the time, to me, there were three big ones: the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five, and the Kinks. Now, those three, they were the top of the cream out of that British invasion. The Rolling Stones were part of it, but they didn't really get going until a few years later.
Well, they were the bad boys. They didn't catch on real quick. And I know the Dave Clark Five. People that aren't baby boomers like us, it's hard to visualize how big they were.
They were huge.
They were huge in the United States.
They were.
And when they left the U.S., they got a TV show in England that went on for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And they continued on in England, and we thought they had just all broke up. But they were really huge.
They were great at taking early American rock and roll songs and turning them into their sound. They did write some great hits, Because, Any Way You Want It. Those were huge, but they were great at taking old songs already recorded and covering those songs their way, making it sound like it was their song.
It's kind of like the Animals. If you mention the House of the Rising Sun, I mean, even to a young person, the only band they think of is probably the Animals.
Yes.
Because that is, I mean,
Well, they were
made that.
They were on the tail end of that British invasion, and that song, House of the Rising Sun, has been recorded many times. If you haven't heard Toto's version, you've got to check it out. It is absolutely great.
The Kinks, a band which I think we both really appreciate.
Oh, yeah. You Really Got Me, All the Day and All the Night. I mean, they
had it all. Songwriting,
yes.
Musicians. But like a lot of bands, they didn't get along. But what two brothers do, you know?
Well, you know, even in the late 60s, I started reading rumors that Jimmy Page actually played the lead in You Really Got Me. That he was a studio musician at that time, and he actually played that lead. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not, but over the years, read and heard that rumor. So
Page was a phenomenal session musician. He played, God, the Donovan song, "Season of the Witch," or Hurdy. No, it was Hurdy-Gurdy Man. Hurdy-Gurdy Man. He uh, he was playing the lead on the track. And I understand that Donovan and Page are still, relatively close friends.
now the Rolling Stones, their early stuff, quite different from what they are now. To me, they were probably a little more creative as far as, uh,
I think they were more edgy in the early years.
they probably were, yeah.
A song that comes to my mind that wasn't, it was one of their early singles, but not one of their more notable ones, "The Last Time." This will be the last time.
Great song, yes.
Wow, I just remember when I first heard that, it was after Satisfaction. I thought, wow, that's some great guitar licks, and
But the early stuff like Ruby Tuesday, they never did another song like that.
very lyrical,
Very more
folky.
more radio friendly than most of what their stuff was back then. Time Is on My Side.
Yeah.
Uh, just really, really good stuff that was just beginning in the later 60s to develop. Speaking of guitar players, the Ventures.
Yes.
Now, they were the only, by my knowledge, they were the only instrumental rock band at that time. And England had their version with the Shadows. They were another all-instrumental band, but the Ventures, they had some hits that made it to the radio.
I used to fly a lot when I lived in Dallas on my job, and I was coming back from St. Louis, and I actually was sharing the seat beside me was the daughter of one of the guitar players of the Ventures, and we talked for about 4 hours, and it was quite fascinating, to hear, her side of being in a family where your dad was on the road all the time.
Right.
Different perspective, I guess, but the Ventures were really huge. They were probably the only band that wasn't a one-hit wonder with an instrumental, and they had hit after hit after hit for a number of years.
Yeah, they toured all the way into the 90s.
Really?
Were huge in Japan. I mean, they probably could have lived there, but they were really big in Japan. So
the Japanese have really picked out some winners. I know Cheap Trick did 4 albums here and never made it. Went to Japan with Budokan album live, and
everything happened.
It paved the road for them. But I think the Japanese definitely have a better opinions of picking out winners than we do.
Yes. The Yardbirds, they were another early group that Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck all did time with the Yardbirds.
Right. And each one of those guitar players, they all had big hits from each of those guitar players. And one can argue all day long, which Yardbirds was the best. But
I remember the song "Shake Some Things."
oh yeah,
very heavy guitar for that period of time. So
I actually have that on 45.
yeah, that's a song you need to check out. And the early Who, I mean, they have come a long way from
Guitar records,
yeah,
equipment records.
Happy Jack to all those early hits.
I Can See for Miles.
Yeah, that was actually their only #1 hit.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they only had one, and that was it.
I actually love that song. I remember playing that on my 8-track in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when I was down there in the 60s for a few months. And wow, I did not know that.
You know, another band that was popular at that time, the Hollies. You know, they made it all the way up into the 70s, but the early Hollies, they actually recorded a song called Carrie Ann. When they wrote it, it was called Mary Ann, for Mary Ann Faithful. And it was pointed out they may get into some legal trouble if they use her real name.
She was huge at the time.
Yeah, they were
in England.
actually, as I saw in a clip, one of the guys said every guy in the band was in love with Mary Ann Faithful. So they changed it to Carrie Ann, and it became a hit.
Hollies. Brad, take us into a little guitar playing of what we're going to do on part two. We're going to venture on a little deeper into the 60s, where guitar playing in general went a little, shall we say, further up
A
the
little
line.
more prominent.
Go ahead. All right, little lick from Led Zeppelin. We're going to call it a day here. Listen, give us a thumbs up if you like us, subscribe to our site, and hey, we appreciate you watching. Have a great day.